Guys, I apologize.
You ready, guys?
I'm going to do the brocha again. You can't be Yotzi the brocha if you didn't hear it or if I didn't hear it. I'm going to go again immediately. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kiddushanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah. Barev na Adonai divrei Toratcha b'finu v'yavcha beit Yisrael. V'niyeh anachnu v'tzeitzenu v'tzeitzeimcha beit Yisrael kulanu yodei shemecha v'lemdei Toratech lishma. Baruch atah Adonai lemed Torah le'emo Yisrael. Amen. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher b'chabal mikol hamim v'natan lanu Torato. Baruch atah Adonai noten haTorah. Okay. Let's go to the correctly. Amen. All right. So it was given by Rabbi Daniel Brody or Broad, as his name is spelled. It's Gary Brody's brother. You know Rabbi Gary Brody. Arthur, not Arthur. Gavin knows him. All right. So let's just go into this directly. We're dealing with an issue of if you've had a change of venue. So we've discussed a major change of place, a non-change of place, and a change of place under the same roof of one's own house or apartment, etc. So the last category is a change of place to somewhere which you don't own, but you have permission to go to, okay? So within the same building, but it's not exclusively yours. So if you leave your house or office, but remain within the same building, via jointly owned shared space under the same roof. So, for example, you rent in a corporate business park and you rent offices, but you go into the municipal area, etc., which is under the same roof. It's not considered as though one has changed one's place because you have the right to be in or go through that space. It is considered your own and it's considered all of yours. It's the same thing that if you're renting for example, either a townhouse or an apartment where you've got communal area, because you're allowed to go there, it's considered as if you're own. And therefore, you do not have to make a new brocha rishona in that joint shared space. Okay? Therefore, if you have another office or apartment in the same building and you go to it, like via the escalator, the elevator, the passage, corridor, stairs, etc., you don't make a new brocha since you're still going within the building under the same roof, okay? So obviously there's much discussion in with the poskim about this, but you should preferably finish eating and drinking in the first place before you go anywhere. So for example, if you're eating an apple in your apartment and then you go to the stairs of the building and then continue eating there or come back to your apartment, you need not make a new bracha ha'etz. Okay? Great. Okay. So, guys, thank you very much. These halachas, I think, are important. And we're going to go straight to the Gemara. We did lose a day of Sunday where I was traveling to KZN. So, unfortunately, there was nothing I could do about it. But we can only go at the best possible place that we can go at. Right. So what we dealt with is we ended on 13A3, okay, and 13A4, fine. We on 13B1. Now I'll tell you where we are. So I'm just going to do a brief summary in 2 sentences from yesterday, is that basically with the Shalema ox that I have, that damages your ox. The portion that goes on the altar is obviously sacrificed, and then we pay you, if it's a tam ox, with the balance. Now the problem is that this is Beshita, as Kevin said, Beshit, but the Aramaic has a hay at the end of it. I'm not sure why compared to the Hebrew. But it means that it's obvious. Why do I need to tell you that you're paying for something that we're not including that amount that's deducted for sacrificial parts? Well, it's coming to say more than that. What it's saying, for example, if I had an ox that was 200 zuz and it damaged your ox that's worth 200 zuz and it's a tam ox, I would ordinarily owe you 100 zuz. But in this particular case, out of my 200 zuz ox, mine, the aggressor ox, I have to give 50 zuz for sacrificial fats, etc. on the altar. I'm left with 150 zuz. And in that case, it's not a case of even though I only owe you guys 100 zuz, that I pay that 100 zuz from some of the meat that's remained over to me, because it would be enough to cover it. What we're saying is more than that. We're saying that the ox cannot be calculated with the total amount having in mind where the meat is compensating on my portion of the meat for the portion that goes on the altar, because the animal itself, in its anatomy, both the sacrificial parts and the parts that I'm entitled to, was a working anatomical animal that damaged yours, and therefore you can't distinguish between what caused the motion of the damage. So what happens is now we weigh it only with the portion that is remaining. So in fact, I'm left with 150 zuz, not the 200 zuz, because the 50 is put aside for the sacrificial altar. So I now weigh 150 zuz, and I give tam, which is half of the weight of the gufa of the animal, which leaves 75 zuz. So I give you 75 zuz, not 100. So you're 25 zuz short. And that's the bottom line of how to work it out simply. You don't have to worry about percentiles or percentages. Just whatever is remaining to you after the sacrificial parts, you reweigh the animal and give half the damages on that animal. And that's the right calculation. Guys, I hope I've summarized it quickly for you. I hope that's been helpful before we hit this new issue. Does it make sense?
It has, thanks. Yes, it does, thanks.
13b1. So, the Gemara cites another law regarding Kodashim Kalim that damaged. Rava said, regarding a Todah animal that damaged, the damaged party collects his damages from the meat, but he does not collect from its accompanying bread. So let me just tell you what this is about. So a todah is a Thanksgiving offering. You generally give it, today what we call is we bench goimel, that if you get through a life-threatening situation, or you're giving an offering in recognition of deliverance from misfortune. And the source of this is Vayikra, chapter 7, verse 12 in Leviticus. And the same is the case of the Shalamim. What happens there is the breast and the right-hand leg are given to the Kohen, and the rest belongs to the owner of the animal and is eaten by the owner of the Todah offering. Todah means thanks, so it's a Thanksgiving offering, or by any other person. In other words, an owner can eat it, or he can give it to his son, etc., etc. So again, the breast and the right-hand leg are given to the Kohen. A certain portion of it goes onto the altar, the Mizbeach, and the rest belong to the owner and is eaten by him or any person that he selects. Okay? So what we're bearing in mind here is we're saying that a Todah offering doesn't just come with the animal itself. You have to bring 40 loaves of bread. Now, those 40 loaves are complete loaves, and 4 of them are given to the Kohen, and the rest belong to the owner and are eaten by him or any person. Does that make sense? You have 40 loaves, you remain with 36, you give 4 of those loaves to the Kohen, and it's part of the Todah offering. Okay? Now, the reason I'm saying this is because what is a Todah offering? It's not just a Thanksgiving offering. What it is it's an atonement offering to a certain extent. So why is it an atonement offering, guys? Why do you think? It is a Thanksgiving offering, a Todah offering, but why is it an atonement offering as well?
You've obviously done something wrong.
Yes. Things don't just randomly happen to you. If things are going wrong in your life, it's a message. You know, we've got to look at ourselves. I'm not exactly the tzaddik of the generation. So if things are going wrong for me, then it's because I'm making mistakes. Or I've caused spiritual damage, and therefore Hashem is trying to teach me lessons. And if you come to a near scrape, it means Hashem has shown mercy on you and grace to you, which a person doesn't necessarily deserve. And you need to atone for something. You need to give it very serious thought what you've done. So in it is a part of it saying, Todah, thank you for sparing me. And another part of it is also an atonement. Does that make sense, guys? Very straightforward. So fine, let's go back to this. So today animal that damaged. I've got an ox, and it damages Arthur's ox, and it's saying that Arthur collects his damage from the meat and does not collect from its accompanying bread, because Cohen has 4 loaves, I get 36 backs, and I have to give 40 loaves, and I have to make 40 loaves in total. So you would say, listen, the Gemara is also puzzled. Why do we need this ruling? Because what damaged Arthur's ox? It was my ox. Does my bread do any damage?
No.
So why would I have to bring bread?
Makes no sense.
To Arthur? I wouldn't need to. Does that make sense? So the Gemara said it's the conclusion of the statement that Rava found necessary to make. For Rava concluded the damaged party eats the meat, and the one being atoned for brings the bread. Okay. So this does seem obvious, but we're going to say, well, what's it actually discussing here? There's something more to it than that. So what it could be is that I would turn around and say, in a state of resentment, you know what? I'm already paying you for the meat of the animal that did damage. The least you could do is bring the bread. Why do I have to bring the bread on top of everything else? Do you understand why there could be a bit of latent resentment? This is what Rav is saying. In other words, I'm already aggravated that I'm having to pay back the damage with the ox that I was going to sacrifice. I was going to enjoy this ox, but now I can't enjoy any of it. I'm giving it to Arthur. Does that make sense? So I'm feeling a bit of latent resentment. So I'm saying, you know what? You bring your own bread. I'm giving you the meat. The bread doesn't cost a lot. Arthur, bring your own bread. And what we're learning here is something deeper, is that because part of it is the atonement part, I might be paying Arthur back in the meat for the damages, but I'm atoning for something that I did wrong. That ox was going to be allocated towards an atonement offering. Does that make sense? So if I want to get the atonement aspect of it, in order to get that atonement, the bread is part of the ritual and the process. So yes, Arthur might be enjoying the meat, but Arthur isn't the one that needs atonement. It's my Todah ox. And if I want to at least get the atonement aspect out of the meat, even though I can't enjoy the meat, and get the sacrifice to go to according to Hashem and to show appreciation for him saving my life, but I also want the atonement aspect. It's the responsibility of the owner, the original owner of that Todah offering, to bring the bread if he wants the atonement. I can't turn around to Arthur and say to him, you know what, you bring the bread. I've already given you the meat. Why must I bring the bread to feed you? Isn't it enough that you've been scoffing all day at my expense? Because that's human nature. Am I making sense, guys? That's how this one ended.
Yep.
All right. Is there any question from any of you? This is pretty straightforward. I've explained this in a bit of Damon language. I hope this makes sense. Okay, fine. So the Mishnah then, so that issue is discussed. Rava therefore informs us that this argument is not valid, because initially it says, without Rava's teaching, you might have said that since the bread qualifies the sacrifice to be eaten, let the damager say to the injured party, shall you eat the meat and I'll bring the bread? Since you benefit by eating the meat, you should be the one to bring the bread. So Rava therefore informs us that this argument is not valid, for the bringing of the bread is the responsibility of the owner. Why? Because the owner is the one that's actually receiving the atonement. The other guy's scoffing and having a lekker meal, but the owner is actually receiving the atonement. So in other words, the Todah is still fulfilling its obligation. Next thing, the Mishnah stated that one is liable to pay for damages done by his possessions only if the damaged properties are properties that belong to members of the covenant. Okay. So what do you think this means, guys? Guys, hello. Can we?
Yeah.
So I'm asking you, in other words, it's saying properties that belong to members of the covenant you pay. It means you're paying, if a Jew damages a Jew, he pays for the damage. So just what does this requirement come to exclude? It comes to exclude the property of an idolater, to teach that one is exempt for damage done by his possessions to an idolater's property. And the Mishnah is saying this can't be, for this has already been taught in a Mishnah below. And what Mishnah did it teach it in? 37b of Bava Kamma. So what it's actually saying is, in Bava Kamma 37b, if the ox of a Jew gores the ox of an idolater, its owner is exempt. Why would the Tana teach the same law twice? Guys, any thoughts from your revision last week?
So you saying that if you gore an ox of an idolater, you don't pay?
Correct. Okay. We're not talking about a normal gore. We're talking about an idolater.
But a Jewish idolater, or it doesn't matter?
No, a Jewish idolater gets the death penalty. That's my first. That's clear. We're talking about...
But the majority of goys are idolaters.
Exactly. So it says when we say properties that belong to members of the covenant, it means that if a Jew damages a Jew's property, you have to make financial restitution. If you're dealing with an idolater, you don't have to. If he takes you to his court, well, I guess you have to. But you don't have to volunteer and pay for it. He's an idolater. And we did learn that there are different types of nations. Are you with me? Some
Yep.
You've got a better relationship with, but the guy's an idol worshiper. And you must know that what goes along with idol worship, because you're saying, well, he's entitled to your beliefs, you're entitled to his, your property is still damaged his, is a lot of idolatry had to do with the fact that, number one, Hashem abhors it. He can't stand it. It's prohibited by Noahide law, even to non-Jews. It's prohibited. Just remember that. That's number one. We're not talking about a normal non-Jew. And then secondly, that's what distinguishes the word idolater. Most of the time, you had a case of moilech or other idolaters where they did human sacrifice. So the person is a murderer. Gavin, he's a murderer, apart from which. So you're not dealing with a tzaddik here. So what we're saying here is in the Mishnah below, it was mentioned in 37b. Why is it mentioned twice? And Gavin, actually, you gave me the answer when we were discussing Maveh being man, many duffs ago, in the second or third duff, is that bearing in mind that this law is not repeated here to teach something different. Remember we said in the opening chapter, it introduces all the topics of Bava Kamma. Kevin, Arthur, it introduces all the topics. So what happens is it mentions it here for the first time. Remember the argument with Rav and Shmuel, where they said, well, Maveh, it's mentioned in later chapters. How come it comes to mention Maveh in the beginning? It's already going to mention it. And Rav turns around and says to Shmuel, yes, it is mentioned in later chapters, but here's where it's first listed as a damager, and it goes to expound it in later chapters. So the Tana teaches this law in our Mishnah as a general rule and later elaborates on the Mishnah below for the same reason that Gavin said in that other example. Well done, Gavin. I remembered that.
Yeah, well done for remembering it.
Okay. So the Mishnah states further, the laws of damages apply to privately held properties. So what are we doing? We're taking the Mishnah and we're going word by word, line by line, and we're just going through some of the issues. So we've already seen that a Jew that damages a Jew's property, you pay for it. If it's an idolater, you don't have to, because that's prohibited by Noahide law. So, and they commit murder and all sorts of things that are abominable to Hashem and serve foreign gods. Okay, we're talking about a proper idolater, not somebody that's parrot. Fine. So we learned that. Now we're learning another thing, and we're examining the Mishnah. So the Mishnah says damages only apply to privately held property. So we're going to examine this. So what do you think that excludes, guys?
Public property.
Yeah, it does. So we learned that there's certain sorts of injury. Well, there's certain things that don't occur in the public domain. Do you remember what they are?
What they don't occur in the public domain?
Yes. When are you not liable for damage in the public domain? Under which case or cases?
Doing regal and
Excellent.
when you do just
What else? Excellent.
So regal in the public domain.
Yes. Guys are your way.
Karen, you would be.
Yeah.
You're correct. Karen, you would be very good. Okay, so now Karen, Gavin, just hang on a second. Karen, you would be liable, that's correct. Regal, you would not be. What has regal got in the same biblical scriptural phrase as regal? It's the same puzzle. What else is in that phrase of regal?
There's what's the other one where you brush against something?
No, not at all. It's shame. It's shame.
Yeah, shame.
No, shame isn't when you brush. Shame is when you consume for personal gratification.
Okay, but that's what I meant. Okay, sorry.
Okay, you did
the wrong
mean
English.
It. You did mean
I meant shame.
No. You didn't do wrong, because a torda of shame is when an animal rubs up against something not in its natural way of walking, but to satisfy an itch. So I'm going to give it to you.
Yeah, that's right. So it's in the right direction. Yeah.
But
I knew it was shame. I couldn't think of shame.
Let me just finish. If he's walking past and he knocks something over, that's normal regal. That's normal regal. If he's doing it to satisfy an itch and he scratches, that is shame, because it's physical gratification, not the way an animal normally moves. But for both shame and regal, you're not responsible in the public domain, only killing. So let's state further, the laws of damages only apply to privately held properties. What does this come to exclude? So the Gemara answers, Rav Yehuda said, the Mishnah comes to exclude a case in which the identity of the damaging ox is unclear. Okay, I'm hearing screaming in the background. Okay.
All right, going on mute.
Sorry. Rav Yehuda
it's similar sorry,
Dave, can I just finish? Sorry, man.
No, finish.
Rav Yehuda said the Mishnah comes to exclude a case in which the identity of the damaging ox is unclear, and the owners of two suspect oxen each place blame upon each other. This one says it was your ox that damaged, and this one says no, it was your ox that damaged. So now what we're going to do is we're going to discuss what does it mean privately held properties, and what does these two ox have to do with it. So a privately held property is considered a singular property. In other words, within that meaning, Kevin, I've got Kevin. Are you there? Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, so Kevin, in this particular case, you've got a particular property, and you've got ox on your property, and Arthur's got ox on his property, and then Gavin's got his particular property, and they're all separate. There's not going to be damage. When there's an area where Kevin's property is joined to Arthur's property and Gavin, and Gavin's ox gets gored, this is not considered, even though it's privately owned property, it's almost like, what do you call it, shared property, like in a townhouse. So Gavin's turning around and he says he wants payment for the damage. But Kevin's turning around and saying, hang on, Arthur's ox did the damage. Privately held properties, you can assign responsibility because they're separate.
Yeah.
So basically, if my ox damages Gavin's ox, you can see that it's my ox because there's no one else around. Gavin, are you with me? But if my ox and Arthur's ox and Kevin's ox is together and your ox gets damaged, we're all going to blame each other. And I'm going to say, listen, it has nothing to do with my ox. It's Kevin's ox or Arthur's, and you need to claim from them. And they're going to say Damon's ox did it, and Arthur's going to say Damon or Kevin's ox. And then you've got a problem. So privately held property is property that's separated or secured. So you can actually determine whose ox did the damage. If there weren't witnesses, you can't just accuse a person. Your ox might be damaged, but either you've got to be able to assign whose ox it is that did the damage or who owns the ox. Now, if I own 20 ox and your property was next to mine and nobody was around for miles, it doesn't matter if you can't identify the ox. It never got hit by a bolt of lightning. It's got two horns impaled into it. One of my oxen caused the problem to your oxen, Kevin. And therefore, you can know it's mine because I might own multiple oxes, but I'm the only owner. When you've got what you call sharehold properties where many people are together, you can't assign blame. You either have to have witnesses which ox caused it, but you can't have two people cancelling each other out and say it was his ox that did it. It was his ox that did it. Does that make sense? In that case, we exempt both of them. So when it refers to privately held properties, it says singular properties, because Rav Yehuda said that Mishnah comes to exclude a case in which the identity of the damaging ox is unclear. And the owners of the two suspect oxen each place blame upon the other. This one says it was your ox that damaged, while this one says, no, it was your ox that damaged. The Mishnah teaches that in such a case, the damaged party can't collect from each owner. And then the Gemara, what it does is it challenges this interpretation. Why does it challenge this interpretation? Because a Mishnah below has taught, if two oxen each belonging to a different person were pursuing a single ox that belonged to a third person, and one of them injured it, and this one says your ox did the damage, while this one said, no, your ox did the damage, they are both exempt. So why repeat the law? So guys, it's saying that this was mentioned at a later point. Why repeat it here if it's coming to teach the same thing? And the reason being is exactly as Gavin once said before when he was bringing the law of Mave. This was repeated again in Bava Kamma 35a. And what it's doing here is it's coming to just outline the bottom line. In other words, it's just mentioning it here, but it's going to expand upon it in Bava Kamma 35a. It's just merely mentioning it in the first chapter. Does that make sense, guys?
Yep.
Fine.
Yeah.
All right. So, how long have we got? How long have we got?
7 minutes.
7 minutes. All right, let's go on. The Mishnah offers a second interpretation of the phrase privately held properties. So in a brisa it was taught this means to exclude ownerless properties. So the Gemara analyzes the brisa's explanation of the Mishnah and what are the circumstances of this case. If you wish to say that it refers to a case where one of our oxen, an ox with the owner, gores an ownerless ox, who's pressing a claim against damages? In other words, my ox damages an ox and nobody has a legal case against me. It's not going to go further than that because who's pressing a legal case against me? Yes, it's ownerless. So what this is trying to say is the legal system with civil law can't pursue a case unless there's a defendant and a litigant. Does that make sense? It doesn't just pick up assumptions. There has to be somebody that's suing you. The state isn't draconian. It doesn't take over and sue you for something that's ownerless. The person that owns that ox would have to sue you. And if you say it the other way around, that it refers to a case where an ownerless ox gored one of our oxen, then let him go and take the ownerless ox. Who's stopping him? So what it's saying is it's the opposite way around. I've got an ownerless ox that gores one of my oxen. So let me go and take the ownerless ox in terms of compensation. Does that make sense? Because I'm not getting the money from anybody. So the Gemara answers, the Mishnah's ruling is relevant in a case where another person preceding the damaged party and took possession of the damaging ox after it did the damage. The Mishnah teaches that in such a case, the damaged party cannot take the damaging ox from its new owner. So this is what it's saying, that if basically I'm the first to quickly take the ox in terms of compensation, it's fine. But I don't have automatic rights to the ox. If somebody's less asleep than me and more awake and sees that the ox is ownerless and kidnaps the ox, I can't take it away from him because I can't take it as compensation for my loss, because my loss doesn't give me automatic rights to the damaging ox. Why? Because we learned in Bava Kamma, acquisition is by the first one that grabs an ownerless object. Does that make sense? So I can't take it back from the guy and say, well, it damaged mine and I'm taking it as compensation. Which, guess what? If an ownerless ox hits my ox, I better wake up quickly and take it as compensation before anybody else does the same. Does that make sense? Because even according to the view when a tam does damage, I take on the gufa of the other person's animal. I automatically have rights to a damaged part to another animal. Because let's get the case clear. With a muad ox, I take from your choice property or your cash. But if your ox damages my ox and you own that ox is paid with the gufa of the body of the animal. So I now immediately acquire rights, automatic rights to your animal as compensation. But the ox has to have an owner. And this is stated by Bava Kamma 33a. If it's an ownerless ox, I can take it as compensation, but not if somebody grabs that other ox first. Because whoever grabs it first owns it. I can't then afterwards take it back and say, but he damaged my ox. Because acquisition works on the first person that takes it. Does that make sense, guys? It's pretty straightforward.
Yeah.
Okay. So the damaged party does not acquire any rights to an ownerless ox that does damage. Thus, if someone else takes possession of it before the damaged party does, he cannot collect. So obviously the thing of what's the bottom line? You better not be asleep when damage happens. Because if an owner's ox damages your property, quickly take it as compensation for your loss. Whoever takes it first has it. All right, guys, I want to thank you very, very much. I hope you have a good Shabbos. I want to thank you for today's session. I want to thank you for your patience. And Marco, I hope your pressure subside and you're able to join us soon. We miss you very much. I don't know if you guys feel the same way, but I certainly miss you, Marco.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I'm missing him.
The sooner the better.
Yeah, so Marco, we're thinking of you and have a good Shabbos, my friend. All right, guys. Thanks.
Shalom, everybody. Thanks, James.
Cheers, buddy.
Thanks, guys.
Bye-bye.
Cheers.